Just Outdoors is brought to you in part by the following community supporters.
Jervalin Hardware Inc., Deer River. Jervalin Hardware offers a broad selection of paints and sporting goods and a complete line of plumbing and electrical supplies. Jervalin Hardware, 108 Main Avenue, Deer River.
Meds One EMS encourages outdoor enthusiasts to prepare for the adventure. Meds One offers wilderness, first aid, and preparedness training for groups of all sizes. Prepare for tomorrow's emergency today. Call 326-0020 or online at meds-one.com.
Good afternoon, folks. My name is Tom Chapin. I'm with Just Outdoors. We're doing a take here at the Cutfoot Sioux egg taking facility on Lake Cutfoot Sioux, Little Cutfoot, right next to Highway 46. And with me today is Chris Kavanaugh. He's the area fisheries manager out of Grand Rapids in this area. And so what Chris and I are going to do is kind of take you through the operation here. It's actually a late season this year. It's May 5th, and they're still in the middle of taking walleye eggs. And it's just a matter of, I don't know, another day or two probably you're going to be done?
We'll probably finish up tomorrow, maybe Saturday.
But tell the folks, this is a real late year, isn't it?
It is. You know, this site's been operated since the 1920s. The normal starting date is about April 20th. Now, last year was the latest we ever started, and we set the net first on May 11th. This year we set the net on May 1st, so we're earlier than last year, but still a good 10 days later than normal. What's interesting is in 2012, that was the earliest we ever started. That was on March 28th. So over the course of 1 year, it was a 6-week difference between starting time.
Yeah, it really varies, and people are used to that with the weather. They understand that.
Yeah.
And so this is going to follow the weather.
Exactly.
No doubt about it. So.
Yeah.
Well, you got quite an operation here, and it's something that I think it really intrigues people because there's only a few of these around the state at this time of the year. And how many are there actually in the state?
Right now we're operating 7 egg take sites around the state. Here at Cutfoot is one of the bigger ones. We have a big one up the tower off of Lake Vermilion. Brainerd, Bemidji, Detroit Lakes, Walker, and Fergus Falls as well.
Okay. The purpose of you here taking eggs from these walleyes is to enhance the reproduction. Isn't that right?
Well, not so much to enhance the reproduction, but to provide an opportunity for anglers to catch walleyes in lakes where reproduction is limited.
I see. So these are going to be distributed eventually when they hatch. You're going to go take these eggs to the hatchery in Grand Rapids, right?
Yes.
And we're going to do a little bit at the end of this, and we're going to show the hatchery also.
Okay.
But right now, this is where you're taking the eggs, and you've been operating, how many days so far now?
This is the 4th day.
Okay, is that average? How many days do you normally operate?
Average is, I hate to use the word normal because nothing is normal. But the average is about 8 or 9 days.
Okay.
Last year we were done in 3 days. The year before it took us 21.
Last year was real late, too.
Last year was real late.
Is it true that the later they run, the quicker it's going to go?
That's been the track record, absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
You know, what's driving the fish to spawn is day length and water temperature. So, I mean, even though we have really cold water temperatures right now, we're about 41, 42 degrees. But because we're so late, the days are longer. The eggs have been in the fish long enough to be mature and ready to be deposited.
Okay.
In 2012, when we started so early, we had warm temperatures, but day length wasn't long enough, so the fish just kind of trickled in.
Sure.
So the earlier we start, the longer it takes us. The later we start, the quicker it goes.
Okay. And because it's so late, and because of the water temperatures and the fact that fish are still going to be in this area, they're closing this area down for fishing on their first opening week.
Yes.
It'll be open the second weekend of the season. That happens about 50% of the time.
No, not quite that. It's actually less frequent than that. It happens to be 2 years in a row now.
Yes.
But before that it was 2008. Before that it was 1997. So it's been our practice that if we're still actively taking eggs 7 days before the opener, we're going to delay the opener in this area for a week. Okay. In part because we're artificially holding fish in this area with our net. So we want to give them plenty of time to disperse and redistribute throughout the lake.
Makes sense. Okay. Yeah, it's going to be good for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. You know, and we have a lot of support from people when we do close it. They understand. Sure. They know.
Okay, we're at this facility, and I'd just like to take the folks through what you have here as far as equipment, what it's used for,
okay,
and probably quantities. I'd like you to mention, how many eggs, and kind of put that into perspective. Quart, what does a quart of eggs mean? How many quarts do you take through an average year here? And where they're going to be distributed around.
Okay.
And so if you could just kind of take it, I'll just follow you around and I'll ask whatever questions might pop up.
Yeah, well, maybe starting at the beginning, we set the net out here when the ice is free off of Little Cutfoot Sioux. We do that for a couple reasons. One is upstream of here, it's very shallow water, and it can get very low dissolved oxygen in the wintertime. So we want it to be ice free so it has a chance to mix and get reoxygenated. The other reason is if the ice is still out there, and it happens to blow into the dock, it would wreck it, and that'd be a bad thing. So we wait until the ice is gone, and then we build the dock, and we stretch a lead going from shore to shore. Look out, we got those orange floats going across.
Okay, you got orange floats going from one side to the other, and that is a net.
That is the lead, yes.
That's the lead.
Yes. And downstream of here is Big Cutfoot Sioux and Winnipegogish. So the fish are swimming upstream to spawn. They come up here because the water's a little bit warmer because of the shallowness, and there's some history of the fish coming up here and running. So they encounter the net, and out in the middle, where the two winches are, the net funnels into it's just a funnel, just that. Comes into the middle of the back pen, and there's an opening that's about 2 feet square. There's nothing keeping the fish from turning around and swimming back out again, except they have their nose pointed upstream to spawn. Also, they like to follow around the perimeter or the edge of the net. They can't find that opening again. So what we're doing right now, or this afternoon, is we're going to be going through what we caught since last night. And if it's not a walleye, we let it go right away. If it is a walleye, we check to see whether it's a male or female. If it's a male, it goes into one pen. If it's a female, we check to see whether she's spent, ripe, or green. Spent meaning she's already dropped her eggs. Ripe meaning she's ready to drop them. Green meaning she's not ready. If it's a spent fish, we let it go. If it's a green fish, we put it into another pen that will go through the next day. And then the ripe fish, we put 5 of them in a tub, and then we'll take them one at a time, remove the eggs from the fish, gently squeezing on the belly, into a pan. And then when we have the right amount of eggs in there, we add some sperm to some water, give that a quick mix, and then mix that in with the eggs. And that's where the fertilization is taking place. The eggs will only accept the sperm for about 2 minutes once they're in contact with the water. Because inside the fish, they have very little moisture content. And so once they come, and that way the fish can hold more eggs in the available space. But once they come in contact with the water, they begin to swell up. And after just a couple of minutes, they've swelled up enough that the pore that the sperm has to enter the egg and fertilize it is now shut. The sperm's only active for about 15 or 20 seconds in the water. So we make that initial mix, and then we'll add more males afterwards. We generally like to use 2 or 3 males per female, and we do that for a couple reasons. One is that's what happens in nature. A female will be surrounded by several males, and when she deposits some eggs, the males will deposit some sperm, and then that process will repeat. And the other reason we want to do it is why they do it in nature. That increases the genetic diversity of the population. Rather than, just a single pair mating, you've got multiple pairs. So once the eggs are fertilized and we've swirled them for 2 minutes, then we add a mud mixture on them. And what that mud does is take away the natural stickiness on the egg. They need that stickiness in nature so that when they're dropped along the lakeshore or onto rocks, they're going to stay where they're at while they're incubating. In the hatchery, we're confining a lot of eggs together in one jar. We want them to be individual eggs. Because if they clump up, those eggs in the middle aren't getting fresh water, and they'll end up dying and then once they die, they get attacked by fungus, which can then affect the other live eggs. So that mud takes away that stickiness. Then we wash off the extra mud, and we'll let the eggs soak in the water for 10 or 15 minutes. That gives them an opportunity to start to swell up a little bit more, less likely to clump. From there, we move them into the coolers, where we have fresh water running over them constantly. And then after 2 hours in the coolers, we move them back to the hatchery. Once at the hatchery, we measure them. We jar them up in 2.5 quarts per jar. And that way we can estimate what our egg take was that day. And then we also rate them, count the number of eggs per quart. Now, we don't lay out a whole quart of eggs and count each one because there's over 100,000 per quart. We have a little trough that, based on how many are in that trough, we can then extrapolate to how many are per quart. And it'll vary from day to day. It varies from fish to fish. Okay. Bigger fish have bigger eggs, fewer eggs per quart. But overall, our average is about 118,000 eggs per quart.
Okay, how many quarts at an average journey through this in the spring?
Well, over the last couple of years, our average has been around 1,300 or 1,400 quarts.
Wow, and you multiply that times the number you just mentioned.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
It's
of,
a lot.
A lot
Yeah.
of potential fish.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the rate of fertilization, the way you do it here, artificially in a way? Mm-hmm. That's what it is.
It is.
Compared to nature. You're really increasing the odds, aren't you?
We are. But you have to put that in perspective with the numbers. It's a numbers game. You know, I mean, here with the thousands of fish that we'll see here, and even taking those 1,400 quarts, that's just a small percentage of the spawning fish in the Winnebago system. And Winnie itself has ample spawning habitat and could do well on its own.
Sure.
But as we started, you know, we do this so that we have fish available for lakes without good spawning habitat.
Right.
And we can provide anglers with an opportunity to catch walleyes.
Do you have in your mind how many lakes you actually supply with walleyes from Lake Winnie here?
From here, no, I really don't, because a lot of the eggs that we take here end up going to other DNR hatcheries. We can run an efficient operation here. We're fortunate with the volume of fish that we have, that we can collect a lot of eggs at a relatively low cost. So we'll provide eggs to the DNR hatcheries in Glenwood and Waterville and St. Paul, and we provided them for other ones as well. So I don't know how many lakes that these fish end up going into. And then here in Itasca County, we have about 15 lakes that we stock with fry each year. And then there's another 20 lakes, 30 lakes that we stock with fingerlings in the fall. Now I want to point out that the eggs that we take here from Cutfoot are really only used in the lakes in the southern half of Itasca County. Lakes in the Mississippi River watershed. Lakes that flow north in the Rainy River watershed, we do stock those, but those fish come from the Tower hatchery because they're also in the Rainy River watershed.
Little difference in not the species, but they're just the way they operate with the colder weather.
We really don't know what the real difference is. I mean, looking at two fish side by side, you wouldn't tell them apart. But there's something genetically different about them. And we want to maintain that in the population and not mess with it by introducing foreign genetics.
Sounds good. Okay, could you take us through just quickly
Sure.
a little operation here? What you got set up?
Well, kind of our typical operation after we've been going for a few days, we have fish in the female cribs. So we have 3 of those set up. The very far one is what we call the day 3. Those are females that we caught 3 days ago. They were green when we caught them, green on day 1, green on day 2, and then they move into that one. So I'll start our day as if we're starting tomorrow. The first thing we'll do is we'll come out and we'll go through the day 3 females. If they're still green, we let them go into the river. We don't hold them more than 3 days. If they're ripe, we'll take their eggs. Once we have that pen cleaned out, we go into the day 2 crib. And there, if they're still green, we slide them over to day 3. Once we get day 2 cleaned out, we do the same thing in day 1. So now that crib is empty, and now we're going through the trap. So if we So here in the trap, these are fish we caught last night, or since yesterday afternoon. And we're going through those. And again, if it's not a walleye, we're letting it go right away. And we'll see, early on, we'll see a lot of northern pike because they spawn a little bit earlier than the walleyes do. Right now, we're really just getting walleyes. Very few other fish, which is kind of interesting. But we'll also see suckers and bullheads, sunfish, crappie, once in a while a bass, and every once in a while we'll even see a muskie up here. It's not very common though, and then dogfish and tulipies as well.
How about these? They all look so big. I mean, people come here and look at these, and they're all big walleyes that most of us seldom see during the summer. Are there smaller females in this that you run across?
Not very often. And the reason is this is a spawning run. These are mature fish. So if it's an immature fish, it really has no reason to run up here in the spring.
Okay.
So, and they're all big fish because the females don't mature until they're about 6 years old and 17 inches or larger. The males will mature at about 5 years old, and they might be 14 or 15 inches.
Yeah.
So, you know, we don't see the small ones that we typically see angling because they're not mature.
Okay, how about the males now? You, what's the percentage of males you get compared to females here? Is it 50-50?
Yeah,
Or
this year it's going to run about 50-50, but typically we see a lot more males than females. And the reason for that, again, is they mature a year earlier, so there's more of them in the population. We're seeing that even ratio this year because it's so late. The males will typically move into the spawning areas earlier than the females, but because we started so late, there were probably a lot of males that moved through under the ice.
Sure.
So we're kind of catching the tail end of the males. And,
Okay, the males, how big do they, would a big male get that would come through
25
this?
inches?
25 inches,
Yeah.
that'd be a big male.
Yeah, and that's an old fish.
That's
That's
an
a
old
20-plus-year-old fish.
Okay, and a 25-inch female might only be what?
That might be 9 or 10 years
9 or
old.
10 years old.
Yeah.
So that's what you're looking at as far as the sexes
Yep.
go.
Yeah.
When you catch something,
Yeah.
you know you got a pretty darn old fish when you got a big male.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And you know the thing is, the males and females grow at the same rate until they reach maturity, and then the male growth rate really slows down. The female growth rate also slows down, but it's at a faster pace.
You're
than
looking
the
at that
males.
maturity at age 4 to 6 years in the
Yeah,
area.
about 5 for males and 6 for females.
Okay, very good. So, here's the pen full of,
Of what we caught
Large
last night, of females and males. And the only way you can really tell them apart, you know, size, I mean, you don't want to just go by size alone. It could be an old male that is really fat. So the only way to tell for sure is to turn them over, put a little pressure on the belly, and see what comes out.
okay,
If white comes out, that's the sperm, you know it's a male. If eggs come out, it's a ripe female. If just a clear liquid comes out and the belly is kind of loose or flaccid, that's a spent female. She's already dropped her eggs. And then if the belly is kind of rounded and nothing comes out, that's a green female.
it's a half a second for your technicians to know that, right?
It's, you know, we move through a lot,
A lot of fish.
Yeah,
I'm looking at this pen here, Chris.
yeah,
There's a lot of fish in there, and that's only from last night.
yeah.
Do you have any idea on numbers here?
Yeah, we already went through part of these today. No, I mean, I could guess. I'll tell you, yesterday we had 3,300 walleyes, and I think we have more today.
Wow.
We've had years to days where we've had 6,000 or 7,000 walleyes in just an overnight catch.
This is a huge run here, obviously.
Yes.
One of the biggest in the States. But yet this is a small percentage, like you were saying, of the amount of fish that are actually produced in this lake.
Absolutely.
There's a lot more females fertilized in the rest of the lake.
Yeah.
This is just a small area, small run compared to the whole lake.
Yeah, you know, if you
Wow.
fished out here, you know, Cutfoot Sioux Lake, there's a lot of rocky points and good,
Sure.
you know, typical walleye spawning habitat. Lake Winnie itself, there's a lot of shoreline with good quality spawning habitat. You got the Pigeon River, the Third River, the Mississippi River, and Ravens Flowage, and other places.
Yeah.
There's a lot of spots out there.
A lot of public land too.
Yeah.
There's no intrusion from people on a lot of the lakeshore on this lake,
Yeah.
is there, compared to most lakes?
You know, a lot of people think that walleyes need a stream to spawn in, and they don't. Most of the spawning is taking place in the lake. We see them in streams because they're confined, and you know they have to come through a constriction at a bridge or something like that. Whereas on the lakeshore, it might be half a dozen here, and then 100 yards down the shore, there's a few more, and a few more. So there's just a lot more area out there.
Okay. What else do we have here?
Well, just this pen over here, that's the males. Those are fish that we've caught yesterday. The ones we're catching today, we're putting on the other side of that pole. We keep a count of how many males we have on hand, so that we know we have enough to fertilize the eggs from the females that we have. As I mentioned earlier, this being a late year, our number of males is not as high as usual. So we're being very conservative, making sure we have enough males on hand to fertilize the eggs from the females.
Do you have a resting period after you take the eggs, or do you just put the fish back in the lake?
After we take the eggs, they're back in the lake.
They're back in the lake.
Right away.
No
They're
resting
free to
period
go.
or anything like that. Okay.
And we don't get all the eggs out of a female.
Sure.
That would be too hard on the fish. It'd be too hard on us. So we'll let them go. They'll continue to go upstream and spawn on their own.
Okay. So where do you let them out? Upstream?
Right here.
Oh, right there, right above the traps.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, when we get going here after lunch, you'll see that we'll take the fish out of the tub, take the eggs out, and then drop it right there, and then go back and get another fish.
So this is removing some of last night's run females to now in the process going to take eggs. That's right.
Yep. 5 and 12. We're going to save some for tomorrow.
We split it like that because there's so many fish in there. We don't want to overcrowd them. We just want to take a little corner at a time.
12 times
and the other
what?
fish can relax a little bit.
15.
To get rubbing on each other. And
Like that.
Stan, we're planning to get a steak. Daryl. Yo, I want you in the hole. Yeah. I was thinking of going
Job.
So here we're putting the eggs from a female into a pan. We start with a pan with no water. Of course, there's a little dripping off the glove, but and the number of females we use in a single pan varies. It depends on how many eggs we get out of each of them. I'm not going to take the eggs out. Not putting much pressure on the belly, and the eggs flow out very easily. So that's about the right amount. So now we'll mix a little bit of sperm and some water, and then that sperm and water mixture on the eggs, and then we keep it moving as we add some more sperm. We'll get good fertilization up here at the table. And once we're done squeezing the fish, getting the eggs or the sperm out, there's a hole underneath the table that we put the fish in, and they're free to go then. Extra fish.
You think so?
I got a theory on that, And after about 2 minutes of mixing, we add the mud, which takes away that natural stickiness on the eggs. There can still be fertilization taking place even in the mud. But with that first pan, by now, the eggs are going to get fertilized, most of them are. Then we'll rinse the mud off and keep the eggs moving. We'll let them swell up. They start to get a little bigger. We have to keep them moving, otherwise they'll clump together, even after we put the mud on.
okay.
Yep, then we'll soak for about 10 or 12 minutes and then we'll continue. And have 2 hours in the coolers, so they'll be done. 2 hours or more, depending on.
So how many trips do you make to Grand Rapids?
Well, just one.
Just the one?
Yeah. So we'll, as soon as we're all done, most of the guys will leave and we'll take whatever coolers are ready. And then we'll have a couple people stay back and then bring the last coolers back. So here, after we've mixed the mud mixture in with the eggs for a long enough time, then we'll pour them off into these egg baskets, or cradles as we call them. They have a fine screen on them. And we'll wash off the extra mud and keep them moving so that the eggs start to swell on their own and not clump up. And then after about 10 to 15 minutes in here, we'll put the eggs from the cradle into the coolers. We typically put 2 pans in each cradle and then 6 cradles in a cooler. And it works out to be in each cradle there's about 300,000 eggs. And so we'll have about 1.8 million eggs per cooler.
Out of the 300,000, what do you know?
Our hatch rate is about 60%. Mm-hmm.
These are all the coolers that are going to be going back to Grand Rapids with the eggs to the hatchery in Grand Rapids. And it's about 18 days or so from now, when these are brought back in, that they will then hatch into something that they can then take to other lakes.
Hatch, if we're going to stock them as fry into the lake, we stock them right away, within a day or two. Because they have a yolk sac that'll sustain them for about 4 or 5 days. Then they got to find food on their own. Some of the fry we put into shallow ponds that we call rearing ponds that will let the fish grow over the summer and then harvest them in the fall as fingerlings. And at that time, they'll be anywhere from 4 to 7 inches long.
Great. Any adults? Do you ever keep anything to an adult stage anymore? I think you used to.
Not by design. You know, ideally our rearing ponds, we want them to be shallow so they winter kill each year. So we start fresh each year. If there's any carryover fish, the new ones have a hard time making it. But occasionally, if we get mild winters, we may end up with yearling or 2-year-old fish in some places.
Great. Well, thank you, Chris, for going through this, your operation here at Touchwood Sioux. This is on May 5th now, 2014, so it's a really nice warm day today, which we haven't had in a long. We haven't had one of these yet. And in about 18 days, I'll be talking to you again at the hatchery in Grand Rapids.
Very good.
I'll go through the system that takes place there.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.
I'm with Chris Kavanaugh again. This is about 3 weeks later since we've taken the eggs from Touchwood. And we're now at the State Fish Hatchery in Grand Rapids here. And you're going to explain the process of how you get these eggs, how they develop into fry, the process you use here in this facility so that the fishermen can see the benefits of this down the line. These are the fish that you fry, fingerlings, and eventually adults that people in Minnesota are going to catch and have on the end of the line someday. We hope so.
Yeah.
So I tell you, I'll just let you run with this because this is quite a process. And if I have any questions as I'm going along that I feel the public might want to hear, I'll kind of get in there with you.
Sounds good.
All right. It's all yours.
So when we bring the eggs back from the dock out at cut flip, first thing we do is we take them out of those coolers we had them in there, and we'll measure them out. We'll put 2.5 quarts in each one of the jars. That's kind of how we keep track. We could put more in or less, but it seems like 2.5 quarts is about the right number for our facility here. So then after about 2 weeks, the eggs will start to really develop. We'll actually start to see the eyeballs develop. We call those the eyed egg stage. And then after about 3 weeks, they actually start to hatch. And we can regulate the water temperature in here, and we do and try to time when our hatch is going to occur to match water temperatures out in the lakes. This year, with the warm weekend we just had, kind of threw us a bit of a curveball, but we're doing a little catch-up now. So the fry, when they hatch, they have a natural tendency to want to swim up and then drift back down. Swim up and drift back down. And the way the jars are set up, there's a spigot on the back side where they overflow. So the fry will go out of the jar into a trough. It might end up going into another jar and then back into the trough, working its way all the way to the bottom, and then finally coming out into what we call the fry tank behind us there.
Now you see the fry go up and down. Now they probably do that in nature too.
Exactly.
And there must be a biological reason for that.
Yeah, well actually the fry are attracted to light early on. And they want to stay up in the upper water column because it's going to be a little warmer. There's going to be fewer predators, and there's going to be more prey available, more zooplankton in that upper water column.
And they're going to start eating right away, aren't they?
Right away. These fry, when they first hatch, they have a small yolk sac, and that'll sustain them for about 4 or 5 days, and then they have to start feeding on their own. We don't feed them at all here in the hatchery. There's no practical way to do that. We can't get enough of the right size food in there to keep them alive. So we move them out as soon as they hatch. This morning, for example, we moved out about 3.5 million fry. We probably have some more we could move out, but we don't have enough truck space for them.
When you look at a container like this, how many million fry, or how many fry approximately?
Yeah. Well, when we start off with the jar, there's 2.5 quarts, and there's about 120,000 eggs per quart. So we have about 300,000 eggs in a jar. We get about a 60% hatch rate. So that would be about 180,000 fry per jar that are coming out. And
So all things that the fry do naturally, that's all committed to survival.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. You know, and in nature, the eggs are laid in shallow water near shore. As soon as the fry hatch and they do that swim up, drift down, they're moving away from shore as well, getting away from predators. So when we stock the fry out in the lakes, we're doing that offshore. We'll take them out in a boat, get away from shore, certainly beyond the weed line, because there's going to be sunfish and crappies and perch, and basically these things at this size, they're prey to anything else in the lake.
And you're going to tell us how fast these things grow a little later here.
Yeah.
They do really put on some weight.
Yeah. So when they hatch, there's about 105,000 fry per pound. And so when we're stocking them out, we don't count the fry, of course, but we do weigh them, and we put about 100,000 into each one of the jugs, so it's a little less than a pound per jug. By the end of the summer, these fish will be anywhere from 4 to 6 inches long. They go that much in that first summer.
So you're looking at about 3 months or so?
Yeah, by September, so they'll be 4 to 6 inches long. It'll depend on how the year goes. If it's a warm summer, they'll be a little bigger. If it's a cold summer, they'll be a little smaller.
And that's when the predators can really take hold on a lot of these too.
Well, they do, and it's a numbers game.
Sure.
You know, I mean, there's a lot going against these things. So when we're stocking the fry in the lakes, we're typically stocking anywhere from 500 to 1,000 fry per literal acre. And if 2% of them survive for the fall, that's doing pretty good.
So your job is to assist nature here, and that's what you're doing, in getting the highest quantity out there that you can possibly get.
Yeah.
With what you know technically.
Yeah. But there's a lot of lakes that have good natural reproduction.
Sure.
They don't need any stocking on top of it. You know, the habitat's been maintained, the water quality is there, and those are perfectly good fisheries. In some of the lakes that maybe don't have the right type of spawning habitat, and there's a demand or a desire, and there's some success with stocking, you know, that's where we're going with these fish.
And that takes a lot of time, a lot of research to figure that out
Yes.
over the years. The more years that you go along, the better you are and more productive you are is trying to figure out which lakes need what.
Exactly.
And that's
Yep,
what's going on.
exactly.
Well, that's a hit and miss thing.
It is. It can be. You know,
Experimental, right?
Exactly. And we're always evaluating.
Sure.
And
Right.
sometimes things change. We might have a stretch of years where the fry don't work so well for whatever reason. Maybe it's a high abundance of crappies or something like that that's doing a lot of predation on them. And then there's some lakes, you know, the deeper, clear lakes like a Wabana or a Turtle Lake, the Kegama Lake. They have good spawning habitat, but they're such deep, clear lakes, they warm up very slowly. So the natural hatch rates in those lakes is very, very low. We could put fry in those, but again, because they don't warm up very fast, the fry don't work.
Survival.
Those are lakes that we stock in the fall with fingerlings.
Okay.
So a lot of these fry will go directly into the lakes. Some of them will go into shallow ponds, which will then go into in the fall and harvest the fingerlings and stock those into other lakes.
Now I see you're heading out with some fry today. What part of the state would they be going?
Yeah, well, all the fry that we hatch here stay in the Grand Rapids work area.
Oh.
So for example, the fry we loaded earlier, those are going out to Dixon Lake. And then we have a bunch of fry in this other truck, and those are going back to Big and Little Cutfoot. And the fry that we're putting in Big and Little Cutfoot, that's a % return because that's their source of eggs.
Sure.
That kind of goes back to our agreement with the Leech Lake Band. That if there's anything different about those fish that cause them to run up to our site to spawn, we want to maintain that in the population, so always puts them back. In the northern part of Itasca County, we do stock fry in there, but they're not coming from our hatchery. They're coming from the hatchery up on Lake Vermilion, because that's part of the Rainy River watershed.
Okay. So none of these fish go down to central or southern Minnesota?
Well, none of these do, but we did send a lot of eggs down to hatcheries
Eggs, okay, that's
in
where
St. Paul and Waterville and Glenwood.
So the actual hatching product here,
Yes.
fry, stay within northeastern Minnesota.
Well, the fry that we hatch, they do.
Okay.
The eggs we do distribute
Right,
statewide.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Very good. Well, take us through this.
Yeah, so, in the jars, as these eggs have been on for quite a while, and they're just about hatched out. Here you can see all the fry swimming up and drifting down. Eventually they'll go into the trough and work their way out to the fry tank. At this stage, any little disturbance can really trigger a hatch. Thunderstorms are something that will really get a hatch going. Or if we were to lose power and it gets dark, that will really get them going. Any sudden change when they're this close. And thinking about it, I think the ecological reason for that is, like for a thunderstorm, if that egg is very close to hatching, nature's kind of programmed it to, okay, well, let's go because the weather's going to get bad. You might get a wind that washes the eggs up on shore, so they'll hatch if they're close enough and get going. We could pinch the tube here and just kind of shut off the flow for a few seconds. And then when I let it go, that will actually trigger more to hatch, getting them going. So when they're really going hard, I mean, this jar would be darn near black because of so many fry in it.
Chris, how about water temperature? If there's a sudden increase in temperature
Yeah.
of the water due to the temperature outside.
Yeah.
Will that?
That will, definitely. Yep. If we were to turn the water temperature up, that would really trigger a hatch, really get them going. And right now, we're trying to regulate it. We don't want all our eggs to hatch all at once because, well, we overload the fry tank and we don't have the capacity to move them out to the lakes fast enough. So we try and time it so that we get anywhere from 3 to 5 million fry hatching per day. That's about what we can handle comfortably. Anytime you pump water, you put it under pressure, you can super saturate any dissolved gases in there. And we don't want those gases in the tank or in the jars because they'll adhere to the eggs and float the eggs out. So we run the water through a degassing chamber. Basically, it's just a box filled with these plastic rings. It just breaks up the flow of water. It breaks the gases down to just saturation, not super saturation. And then this is all gravity flow from here, through the troughs, through the jars, and then ultimately here to the fry tank. And then the fry tank is set up with drains on each end, and we have a fine mesh screen on there. You may have noticed we have the bubblers going. So what those bubblers do is it keeps the fry off the screen, and it keeps the screen clear of eggs, so that we don't end up overflowing the fry tank.
Very fine mesh.
Very fine mesh.
So what's the reason for this?
Well, because the fry are very fine. They're very small. We don't want them to get stuck in the net. This is so fine they'll just stay on top of it there. Okay. Then what we do is we'll go into the fry tank, and the fish do like to congregate on the ends. They're easily running the net through, and you can see all the fry wiggling on there. So we'll kind of crowd them down to one corner and brush away some of the water. And then we weigh them into the pan. So this is a little over a tenth of a pound. So in that batch, there's probably 15,000 fry there.
How long does the fry stay in the tanks here before you take them?
We pretty much try to clean it out every day. Now we're leaving a few in there today, but tomorrow morning we'll have this pretty much empty. And again, because the fry have that yolk sac that only sustains them for a couple of days. So we want to move them out of the hatchery and into the lake as quickly as we can.
That's a lot of fry, it seems to me, to move in one day. I mean, there's a lot of work here to take all those fry up and get them out of here.
Yeah. When we're doing it, we've got a big crew,
yes.
And everybody's got a job to do and keep moving.
So you've got a pretty valuable resource right there by the time you get it to this tank.
Well, that's right.
There's a lot of work going on.
Dealing with a live product there, you can't just leave it sit.
And 3 weeks ago, setting everything up, and all of a sudden, this is the final process right here.
Yeah.
Before it's transported to a
yeah. So we use these. You've probably seen these, if you camp at all, just collapse in a water jug. And we'll fill it up with about 2 gallons of water to the line. And then we'll add in their fry. We'll put up to 100,000 in a jug. And then we can compress the air out of it. Put the cap back on. We've modified the caps with the valve stem from the tire. And then we have oxygen that will pump in to get the bag, not over full, but tight. And then we can hold the fry in these bags for hours and we'll be just fine.
Not a lot different than when you're picking up minnows at a minnow deal.
Yeah. Packing oxygen. Yep.
But then again, the temperature is important here now. So explain that. If you go from hot to cold or cold to hot, what's the problem?
Yeah, the fish are acclimated to a certain temperature that they're used to. And if you move a fish from cold water to much warmer water, that can be pretty hard on them. That induces a lot of stress on the fish. It's easier to go from warm to cold and cold to hot. But even there, too much of a temperature change can be tough on the fish.
Okay, that reminds sports people when they're out there, when they pick up minnows, that they should allow those minnows to adjust before pouring them in the can.
Exactly.
So it's no different with fry or adult fish.
So as much as we try to match the temperature here in the hatchery with what the lake water temperatures are, this really warm weekend really warmed up the lakes pretty fast. So when we get out to the lake, we'll take the jugs, we'll float them in the lake for 10, 15, 20 minutes. Let them start to warm up a little bit before we release the fry.
Yeah. Adjust to the temperature of that.
Exactly.
Okay. Now you're showing us the transportation of these fry out to a certain lake. These are going to, like you say, Petal.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, what's a little different about these is the fry that we stock in Big and Little Cutfoot, we mark them with a chemical called oxytetracycline. It's actually an antibiotic. It's used commonly in the agricultural industry. What the oxytetracycline, or OTC, does, we soak them for 6 hours in a solution of it. That's why this water looks a little murky, a little yellowish. That's the oxytetracycline in there. We soak them for 6 hours, and then what happens is the only bone that's really calcified in the fish right now is the otolith, or an ear bone. And the oxytetracycline gets taken up there. And then months or even years later, we can extract that otolith, look at it under a special microscope with UV light, and if it has the OTC, it will fluoresce, or it'll kind of glow. That way we can tell if it's a stock fish versus a naturally reproduced fish.
Does that have anything to do with aging? Can you age a fish with that?
Well, you can. That's what we use the otolith for.
So, people that might bring in a fish that's caught under those conditions, would you look at that first?
Well,
or would you look at the scales?
If we're just interested in the age of the fish, we would just look at the scales.
Okay.
Because taking the otolith out, there's a process there. You have to cut the head open and find it in there, and then you have to prepare it in order to read it. Whereas the scale, you can basically hold that up to we use the old microfiche readers you used to see in the libraries and that. And they're harder and harder to find now, but they work great for it, because then we can magnify the scale on the screen and lay down growth rings much like a tree does. Except, a tree lays down one growth ring per year. A fish is laying down multiple growth rings within a year. And then in fall and winter, when the water temperatures are cooler, those growth rings are tight together and they cross over. And in spring, when things warm up, they start spreading apart. So we're looking at that crossing over part on the scale to determine the growth rate of the age of the fish.
Okay, now this chemical you're giving right now, that must have something to do with showing you the percentage of stocked fish in the lake?
Well, it can, right. We can.
When you go back 6-7 years later?
Yeah, not quite that long.
Okay.
Remember, these fish are so small when we're marking them, they're not taking up much of that chemical. But after about 3 or 4 years, we're still pretty confident in determining whether it was a stock fish that was marked or a naturally produced fish.
And what does that do for you for statistics? What is that?
Well, it helps answer the question of, is the stocking really doing any good or not? Is it necessary?
Sure.
And in the case of weaning, we're using it for some more things there as well. Pretty high tech, a lot of math involved in that. But looking at the hatch rates and getting population estimates and other things. But in other lakes, we'll use it just to see, are our stock fish showing up in the same proportion or greater proportion than naturally produced fish? To help answer that question, is the stocking contributing anything?
Sure. And you've got a lot of lakes that you still aren't quite aware of the potential for stocking.
Yeah,
It keeps going on and on.
It does, and stocking, it's a very popular activity. People really like it. They think they think that's all we do. It's an important part of our job, but it's only a part of our job.
And you don't want to waste your time on stocking a lake that doesn't need it.
Exactly.
And that is something you learn as you go on. You've probably done that in the past because you're learning all the way along.
Yep, exactly.
But I can't believe how much technology is going into this with this chemical you're adding here. And you're learning all kinds of things every year. The technology is really helping you on all this.
Yeah, new tools, without marking them, we can stock a lake. Our typical stocking plan would be every other year. So then we would look at 2014 as a stock year, 2015 would be no stocking. Then down the road we can look, okay, do we see any 2015 year class fish? And of the 2014 year class fish, well, without marking the fry, we don't know if those were stocked or naturally produced.
Interesting.
So
you can do that.
There's a lot of effort that goes into it. The marking part is easy. We marked 3 million fry this morning, no big deal. It didn't cost very much. The amount of chemical we use is, maybe have $20 into it, the chemical cost. The real cost comes in extracting the otolith and preparing it and reading it. So we use it very carefully. We can't do it everywhere at all lakes. It's a limited tool. And we use it where we really need to answer that question.
Well, this has been great. People are going to learn about fish stocking, about the hatchery they have right in Grand Rapids here, that they probably weren't aware of. And the process that takes place from that early spring day when you go out and under all kinds of weather conditions and collect those eggs. You come in here to the hatchery and all of a sudden 3 weeks to a month later they're gone and they're out in the lake somewhere in this area.
Yeah.
Really neat.
Yeah.
So folks, just remember that this process is going on annually in your area right here, right in the Grand Rapids area. And remember, stay informed on this.
Thanks, Tom.